残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけをただ見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるもの求めることに夢中で憂いさえまだ知らない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には
Hey everyone, welcome to Neighbor Science, the only podcast about political economy and anime. We are here today to talk about depressed robots and their depressed pilots. Today is episode 2 in the Mecha Madness miniseries that I'm doing. So today we're talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion, easily the best giant robot anime in my opinion. And to talk about it with me, I have Reed. Hey Reed.
Howdy, what's up?
Not much. So what is your experience with Evangelion?
Well, I think for me it was like I experienced it in precisely the correct way that one is supposed to experience Evangelion, which is like as a 15 and 16-year-old experiencing major depression for the first time, and then like sneaking. And this is before like we had like personal computers at my house or like smartphones, so sneaking downstairs in the nighttime to the family computer that was in the kitchen to watch fan-subbed episodes illegally online and really vibing and just like crying at 2 a.m. in the kitchen. So,
how did you get it? Did you have to use peer-to-peer or something?
No, I was just like streaming it like a noob.
Oh, wow. I didn't know they had streaming back then.
Yeah.
Or you're younger than I think you are.
Yeah. I'm a bit younger than that, but we just don't have a lot of computers around or nothing.
Because if I were to watch it as a 15-year-old, I would probably have to download it on either Rapid Share or some kind of torrent.
Yeah, no, this is like early days of like Kiss Anime and Watch Cartoon online kind of like bootleg streaming stuff.
Dang. All right. Yeah, I did not have the essential experience, unfortunately. My friends all told me to watch it when I was a teenager, and I was like an obstinate like hipster type, so I was like, fuck that. Razafon's so much better, and so I didn't watch it until like 3 months ago, and since then I've watched it like 5 times. So
yeah, important question: Netflix version or original sub?
Well, I watched the Netflix version. But it was the sub, and I don't think they changed the translation of the sub. I think it was only the dub they changed, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, there are some changes to the subtitles as well from between Netflix and the older version that I watched.
Well, I guess we may as well dump this audio then.
Yeah, they're both good, despite what the nerds say. I prefer the nostalgic, edgier one that I watched.
So I guess we need to give an intro for people who don't know what it is, even though, I mean, besides Dragon Ball Z, it's probably the most well-known anime, I think.
It's
Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Spirited Away, and then, Pokemon, yeah. And then, yeah. So
yeah, I think
top 5, probably.
And Evangelion, I feel like, is pretty commonly people's, like, first intro to, like, anime and animation in general with like adult themes, you know, like young adult and adult themes, and like,
especially because they cut all the gay stuff out of Sailor Moon.
Yeah, exactly. They left all the like psychological, existential stuff out of the American version.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you watch it in the original Japanese, it's like so deep and dark, you know.
Yeah. You'll understand the themes a lot better.
Bro, it's totally not for kids. It's totally not for kids.
Yeah, you know, cutting all this stuff in the American version is just all according to Keikaku.
Yeah. Ironically, Evangelion was rather controversially aired during a children's TV like programming slot when it was airing originally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so people were like, "What the fuck are you showing on this time slot right now?"
That's interesting. So the first Mecha Madness episode we did was Gundam, and Josh pointed out that Gundam was taken off of the air because of 9/11. So that's the second weird time slot thing that's happened in a row, I guess, for us.
What, the Federation did 9/11?
Yeah. Anyway, so Evangelion basically is about Shinji Ikari, who is a teenager who's estranged from his father, and he is brought to Tokyo 3, which is like an artificial city. Well, artificial city. They're all artificial. It's a it's like
a fortress city.
Yeah, fortress city. There you go. Built after the second impact, which is an event that they explain in various levels of correctness through the series. And it basically caused like the ice caps to melt. So it's a post-climate change apocalyptic future. And so Shinji is brought to Tokyo 3. I don't remember why they told him he was, but he was brought there basically so he could pilot a giant robot, developed in a program that his father is head of. And it turns into like a really just crazy psychological and philosophical like exploration. And there's a lot of like apocalyptic stuff even beyond the second impact. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff happening in Evangelion. Highly recommended that everyone check it out if they haven't already. But so we're gonna be talking a lot of spoilers, I would say. So if you haven't seen it and you don't like spoilers, wait until you've finished it to listen to the rest of this.
Yeah. We're gonna spoil every single alternate timeline.
Yeah. So one major thing that I think we should note about Evangelion is that it is a deconstruction of the giant robot genre. So like some of the hallmarks of the giant robot genre are, obviously the giant robot fights. There is the alien attackers who often we don't know their origin, or like, what their goals are or anything like that. They have very young pilots, like teenage pilots. They have like the robots will move around and do like martial arts with, the pilots just like sort of pushing handles around, and that doesn't, it doesn't really make sense. But so they take on all of this stuff. So in Evangelion, the pilots are like literal child soldiers and have all of the issues of real child soldiers. The giant robots can move like that because they only sort of need pilots. They're actually just like aliens with souls, and they just have armor around them to restrain them.
Or in some case, like essentially they're human beings. And the way that the children pilot them, they explain piloting with minimal hardware is that they're psychologically connected to the central nervous system of the robot. So it's implying that they feel all the damage mentally that the robot takes, and that's how they control it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the pilots are basically just like psychological service dogs.
Yeah.
They're just there to like make the aliens feel less anxious.
Yeah. the cockpit is basically just like inserted directly into the spinal column of the robot.
And the kaiju that they fight, the aliens, the alien enemies, they are basically the same life forms as the giant robots, but they don't have the armor around them that makes them, controllable by humans. So yeah, I think it's like one of the earlier like genre deconstruction shows. There's been a lot since then. Like One Punch Man is probably the most well-known one.
Yeah, and I want to point out too, like, so the director Hideaki Anno and several of the people who worked on this were the founders of Gainax, which is like a very big animation studio. It's created a lot of pretty famous stuff, and kind of a hallmark of a lot of their like flagship shows is that they do this thing which is basically like they deconstruct a genre, but do it in a way where they sort of like deconstruct it by doing like a reductio ad absurdum kind of argument where they just maximize every single like trope of the thing. So they kind of take it as a deconstruction that kind of like comes out the other side in a sense, makes you be like, whoa, that's way sicker than even like the lame genre tropes. Like they take the genre tropes and make them kind of like awesome and terrifying again by just turning the volume up to 11 on all of them.
Yeah. And another hallmark is the Gainax ending, which is where they have an ending like Evangelion, where it's just like really complex and absurd and kind of hard to follow, and a lot of stuff happens all at once. So, since we are a political economy podcast, there are some political economy themes in Evangelion that we can talk about. I think the biggest, most obvious one is the deep state. The events of the series are mainly orchestrated by Nerv and Sayla, which are two secretive organizations. Nerv is a independent organization created after the Second Impact, or I guess it was actually before the Second Impact because they sort of caused it. But
they're essentially like a private military and scientific contracting company.
Yeah, it's like if the UN was actually effective, and it's also a branch of the UN. So
yeah.
And then Sayla is more like propaganda due, if anyone knows what that is. yeah, it's like a state within a state sort of thing. So it's they have like Illuminati type control over everything, complete with like people meeting as like masked men who are all like important heads of industry or government organizations or shit like that.
Yeah, interesting that Sayla is German for soul, and nerve is kind of like, I feel like implying sort of like nervous system or like nerves, so sort of like soul and brain is an interesting parallel that they set up there.
True. They also have like shell organizations. Well, at least one. We know of one specifically, which is the Marduk Institute, which in the show is supposedly making the decisions of who actually becomes an Eva pilot. But we find out later it's just a front composed of companies that have nothing to do with the process, and they just serve to conceal like the direct control over the selection process by Ikari and is it Ritsuko that's doing it as well, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah. They like Nerve has like a huge amount of control. Fuyutsuki at one point in the show says like just straight up that city council in Tokyo 3 is a sham because everything is governed by the Magi, which are like the Nerve's supercomputers. So they just like govern everything in Tokyo 3 themselves. So it's like really, really like a deep state type thing. And at another point in the series, Matsuhiro is talking to Shinji, and he mentions something that just happened. I think it was like one of the angel attacks, and then a voice comes on the call saying the call has been monitored and will be terminated for security reasons. So they're just like surveilling everything that's happening, much like the state that currently exists now. After Shinji fights Sachio, which I think that's the first angel that comes, we see business leaders talking with his father Gendo about the general population's knowledge of angels and the activities of Nerv. And immediately after, the Prime Minister of Japan puts out an address that goes out on every channel to like just bury the story with something else. And Misato refers to it as scenario B22. So like they just had like plans to deal with any sort of like media leaks like already in the bag, and they just had to, you know, make some calls to make it happen. She even says it was thanks to the public affairs office, so they have like a specific bureau of Nerv to influence the media, which I think she said they're usually bored. So this was like the first like action they actually had. And then episode 6 is just all about Misato having to navigate the deep state bureaucracy in order to get a big ass gun to kill an angel.
Yeah.
So she has to like requisition all of the energy in Japan for 7 hours to power like a giant gun. And
somehow not let anybody know what it's for.
Yeah. Yeah, somehow that worked. And then like in episode 7, the staff complain that they're perpetually short on budget despite, you know, supposedly being the saviors of humanity. And then later when they tried to build a giant robot with a nuclear reactor, and it shockingly goes on a rampage, and they start making calls trying to, you know, get someone to fix it, and all of the top bureaucrats that they call are just passing the buck along to the next guy. One of them is shown to be golfing, and he just says, ask someone else. So
yeah, and
pretty
interesting
accurate.
with that episode too, like the that giant robot is sort of like the classic like giant robo anime. It even has like some ridiculous like stupid like cartoony name, and it's fully mechanical. Oh, yeah. So it's sort of like contrasting the like the biological cyborg mutant alien robots of the Evas with the more traditional like giant robo fully mechanical.
Yeah, didn't it also have like the like two flexible tube arm type arms?
Yeah, exactly. It was just like real goofy looking.
Yeah. I guess I have like a huge long thing here about Keiretsu. I guess I can talk about that. May as well.
Yeah.
So I don't even know where I got this. Oh, I got this from Sci-Hub. Okay. From yeah. All right.
Well, we got sources. All right.
Yeah. So I have this oh yeah, this is actually an article about Evangelion, on like a scholarly article about Evangelion. Damn. Because it is like the anime equivalent of serious literature, so there is like real scholarly analysis of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to dig into.
Yeah. So this author, let me just pull up the name. Dennis Redmond. This is from Anime and East
Dennis
Asian
Rodman?
Culture. Yeah, Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman writes, Japanese big business is characterized by vast interlocking networks of shareholdings, trade links, and credit facilities called keiretsu. The original Japanese word is an adjective, roughly meaning parallel or related, but economists often use it as a noun. Since 1995, the main financial centers of the keiretsu have undergone a massive series of fusions and consolidations, creating 3 superbanks: the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, Sumitomo Mitsui Bank, and Mizuho Bank. These banks are part of vast industrial networks which trade and invest all across East Asia. It's important to stress that Anno is highly critical of East Asian big business, and several episodes of Evangelion are scathing satires of corporate turf battles, corruption scandals, and political imbroglios of keiretsu capitalism.
Yeah, and you'll know, it's kind of like in other cartoons and stuff, when you see like characters who are like rich, they're said to have like rich parents, like
Mm-hmm.
such and such's father is like the president of X like industrial conglomerate. That's kind of what they're talking about. It's not just like an ordinary company.
Right. Yeah, and then we also talked about in I don't know what episode it was. I might be able to find out later, but the Kazuko, which was like in the transition from the Edo period to the Meiji Restoration, they took all of the important families in like the old feudal system, and basically just converted them to important families in the capitalist system, which were known as the Kazoku. So they had like special influence over the new Japanese capitalist state. So there's like a long history of like what people would call crony capitalism in Japan. But I mean, it's just like ordinary capitalism. That's just how it works. But
yeah, and I think also interesting in that whole side track there is a lot of those same like people running that this whole system, the Keiretsu system, are often also closely tied with people in like the ruling party who are on like the far right, who are often sort of far right nationalists leaning towards kind of fascist Japanese empire restorationist people. And one of their big pet issues that they always bring up in the Diet is trying to change the constitution to lift the ban on them having a standing military and being able to like, they're always pushing to further empower and militarize the SDF, the self-defense force, which ends up, the SDF becomes extremely militarized in Evangelion and ends up playing an important part later on.
Yeah, especially in End of Evangelion.
Yeah.
Just a side note, because I just learned more about this recently, but another pet issue by the far right in Japan is having the prime minister visit Yasukuni Shrine, which is a shrine where they commemorate tons of fallen war criminals that occupied Manchuria in World War II and like killed millions of people, and raped lots of Korean women and Chinese women and stuff like that. Pretty fucked up stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And while we're on this sidetrack, one more thing. Since you guys just did the episode on modern monetary theory, there's this weird thing that just happened like a few months ago where Stephanie Kelton, the one of the main spokespeople for MMT, went to Japan and had a meeting with several members of parliament there, and particularly had private meetings with some of the most egregious sort of far-right LDP fascist sort of pro-nationalism, militarism experts. Because like you were mentioning, MMT can be used for, full social programs or full fascism.
Right.
If people want to like get the details of that, the Libertarian Socialist Caucus in DSA, some of their members did like a deep dive and released a statement kind of explaining what went down with that.
Damn, that sucks. Yeah, she does seem like sort of not apolitical, I guess, but like she doesn't seem to have like that much of a political alliance or like a strong alignment with anyone. Because I'll see her on Twitter like quote tweeting like people on the right and saying like explaining to them that, oh yeah, you guys don't actually have to tax people to have to do government spending. And it's like, shut up, shut the fuck up. Yeah. Don't tell them that.
They dug up enough dirt in that statement about it that her like MMT crew kind of did a response to it, saying like, oh, she didn't know they were far right, and oh, she also met with members of the Communist Party, but the fact is she just like had specifically like private lunches giving specifically the far right people economics advice.
Yeah, Yeah, and also the Japanese Communist Party isn't as far left as the far right party is far right.
Yeah, they're the Japanese Social Democrats.
Yeah.
Although, interestingly, they are the biggest parliamentary communist party in the world, I believe, last time I checked.
That kind of sucks, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to read more of that article, I'm not going to read more of it, but yeah, it's in the show notes. You can look at it through Sci-Hub. It was pretty interesting. Although I think he gets some stuff wrong because he says something is a fairly explicit reference to the post-Cold War scenario of Valve Software's Half-Life, which came out 3 years after Neon Genesis Evangelion, so
yeah, all right.
I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, another major theme in Evangelion is the post-apocalyptic setting that it takes place in. So as we said before, the second impact melted the ice caps. We see flooded cities everywhere throughout the show. But I think unlike other post-apocalyptic worlds like Blom or Terminator or Attack on Titan, the world of Evangelion continues basically almost exactly like it did before. So they have this new deep state organization that's supposed to manage any crisis related to the second impact. But other than that, Nerve's operations are hidden from the public. Nobody really pays attention to them except for the one kid. I can't remember his name, but the military nerd kid.
Yeah, the military otaku kid.
Yeah.
Sort of the guy next staff's self-insert character.
Yeah. So no one else really cares about it. And then anytime we see the school class actually happening in the school, the teacher is just talking over and over about the second impact as a sort of historical subject. He's just talking about
thus mankind was able to rise from the ashes caused by the hell that was the second impact. With each passing year, the birth rate continues to decline. Just
stuff like that. So it's I think it's a more realistic post-apocalyptic thing because instead of society changing completely into, this social Darwinist fantasy that we see in a lot of stuff, it's just everything continues except it's just getting worse. Everything's just getting worse.
Yeah, and something I think is interesting about that too, the post-apocalyptic setting of Eva is all those other post-apocalypse settings that you mentioned. The symptoms of the apocalypse that people are dealing with are more fantastical. Rather, with Eva, it's the post-apocalyptic symptoms that people are living through are real ones that we're experiencing right now and have been since the show was created. Basically the two main impacts are sea level. It has to do with the seas for the most part. So sea level rise, and then also I think they mention, it's either in the original series or the rebuild, basically that the second impact also wiped out nearly all life in the oceans.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that.
Kind of sterilizing the oceans, which is also happening. But so it's they're realistic effects with a supernatural cause. It's kind of an unusual way to turn it around.
But if you really think about it, it's not even a supernatural cause. It's the cause of that's happening in reality because they're humans.
Yeah. So it's just sort of like a supernatural catalyst, but by ongoing human behavior that exists in the real world.
Yeah. And another thing I thought was interesting was another thing about most post-apocalyptic media is after the apocalypse, everything is dead, and it's usually like a desert setting, or just in some way dead setting, everything is dead around the characters. But in episode 4, Matsuhiro mentions that cicadas are much more numerous lately, And Shinji says it's because the ecosystem is coming back to life, because a lot of human population was wiped out and a lot of states collapsed. And so the ongoing destruction of the ecosystem that was happening before the apocalypse stopped a little bit.
Unfortunately, the United States still exists.
Well, can't win them all.
But their Eva blew up, so fuck them.
That's true. They bikini told themselves. Yep.
About time. Sorry, too dark.
So I think the most interesting part of Evangelion is the philosophical elements. There's a lot to talk about in that respect. For me, one of the most interesting parts of it is the Kierkegaardian philosophy. I think they borrow heavily from Kierkegaard, who, if you don't know, he's a Christian philosopher from Denmark from the 19th century, I think, 18th or 19th. And his big thing was he sort of like defined the concept of anxiety and connected it to like people trying to find a purpose in life. So even though he's Christian and I don't like Christianity at all, I really like his philosophy because he talks about any given human goes through like certain stages of life according to him. The first stage is basically just like trying to like survive as a person. The second stage is developing an aesthetic and trying to like find pleasure through aesthetic. And then the third stage is like trying to live ethically and finding a higher ethical purpose to work towards in your life. And then the fourth stage, which this is where I get off of the Kierkegaard train, is living a Christian life. So you go beyond the ethical life and you submit yourself to God, and that's like your true high purpose.
Yeah, that's my stop. I'm off.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Submit yourself to instrumentality, maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a heavy Christian aesthetic in the show, which like we could read as being connected to Kierkegaard. But according to the staff, they just did that stuff to be edgy, basically, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of like do the whole like kind of Da Vinci Code, just like Christian symbology and conspiracy stuff, like going, pretending that like the angels were prophesied in the Dead Sea Scrolls instead of it just being a bunch of apocryphal Bible books.
Right. Yeah. But they do in the show, like, there is an explicit reference to Kierkegaard. I don't remember what scene it is, but there is a scene where you can actually see a Kierkegaard book in the frame.
Okay.
So they definitely were thinking of him in the show. The aim of the Human Instrumentality Project is to eliminate the problem of dread, which Kierkegaard conceptualizes as an unfocused fear that comes from individuality and a lack of self and purpose. According to Kierkegaard, dread is a necessary part of life and the development of the self, and only by focusing one's fears and committing oneself to a meaningful existence, which I consider the ethical life and he considers the Christian life, can one overcome dread. So according to him, basically dread is like the agony that people feel from like having like a pointless life and not being able to understand what other people are thinking. So in order to overcome it, you have to like give yourself a purpose. And like for the aesthetic life part, where people are just engaging in sensory pleasures, Kierkegaard says that people grow tired of that because eventually you run out of like any novelty with sensory pleasures, and so that's usually when people ascend to the ethical stage of life, is when they realize all of this stuff that I enjoy is like getting pretty samey, and there's no point to my existence if like all I'm doing is hedonistic pleasure, that especially if it's like getting dull.
Another reason why the show is somewhat devastating when you watch it as a teen, because you're really starting to like have fun with the hedonistic pleasures of life, and then you're like, oh fuck, these actually suck. Life is meaningless.
Yeah,
better like
exactly.
take 100 dabs and see if that helps.
So Kierkegaard during his time saw most people as either ignoring dread by going along with the herd and doing the hedonistic pleasure stuff, going along with the herd and I guess in like the higher purpose type stuff that they're doing. He was the type of person that thought most people weren't true Christians. He was kind of a gatekeeper with Christianity, which yeah, I have no feeling about that because Christianity
You're
sucks.
only a true Christian if you agree with me.
Yeah.
Unlike all those other Christians,
Right.
I'm right.
And the other way people ignored dread was through the pursuit of physical pleasures, which again works for a time but loses effectiveness. So we see this with Misato and Kaji, who spent an entire week lying around banging each other and came to the realization they were trying and failing to fill a void left by trauma and dread. They make several references to that through the show of like, oh yeah, you guys just spent like a week or lying around in bed, and that's the aesthetic existence. And then the ethical existence is Misato joining Nerve to try and what word am I thinking of?
Try and win her dead dad's approval, kind of. I mean, that's the other elephant in the room for the show is
that's the
issues.
Underlying motivation, and then like the surface level motivation is like trying to better humanity, I guess, or defend humanity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, the dead dad stuff is I think you're right, is the underlying thing.
Pretty much everyone important in the show is dealing with the trauma of like having lost or been rejected by a parent in their life.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more when we talk about Freud, which is also a big
Freud,
part of the series.
Baby.
Let's see. So I have a quote here from End of Evangelion, which is, if they can visualize themselves in their own minds, anyone can return to human form. And I think that describes the need to work to achieve selfhood in Kierkegaard's philosophy. So the original ending also describes this. Only by understanding the differences between oneself and others can one develop a sense of self. Only by relating oneself to others can you develop a sense of self. And
a little Kierkegaard digression here. That argument you just spelled out. Shout out to homie who shall not be named, who's a big Hegel nerd. What they've told me over and over again is that's like basically a perfect like one-for-one match of Hegel's conception of the self, which is somewhat problematically named the master-slave dialectic. Basically the idea of only being able to conceive of yourself through your relations with others. Like, he's got a quote here. I'm pulling from the Wikipedia page because I know nothing about this besides what I've been told. On approaching the other, it has lost its own self, since it finds itself as another being. Secondly, it has thereby sublated that other, for this primitive consciousness does not regard the other as essentially real, but sees its own self in the other. Yeah, Hegel is fucking impossible to read, but trust this other person judgment on this one.
Yeah, I would definitely have to read that quote several times to know what the fuck it's saying.
But it's a legit philosophy thing. I think it's gone on to influence a lot of important work. Specifically, Fanon uses it to describe colonial relations between colonizers and the colonized in black skin and white masks.
I didn't know Livy was such a philosopher.
Yeah. And some people say he was inspired by the Haitian Revolution. That's where he got the idea, sort of.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, back to Kierkegaard.
Yeah. So, in contrast to humans, God is completely alone. And in End of Evangelion, they talk about how Shinji would basically be able to become God. So the Evangelion allows someone to become God and live forever, long past when any person is alive. But they would be completely alone, so they would basically lose their selfhood. They wouldn't be human anymore because they have no relation to anyone.
And interestingly, that is sort of the conclusion of End of Evangelion, spoilers, where even though Shinji is rejected in instrumentality, the Eva is sort of like petrified and jettisoned into space with his mother's... Eva Unit 1, spoilers again, is basically powered by Shinji's mother's soul, who, it's implied, intentionally dissolved her form in order to inhabit the Evangelion for the exact purpose of what happened at the end of Eva, where the Evangelion became like an eternal testament to humanity's existence floating in space all alone, essentially God.
Yeah, this show is crazy.
Yeah.
And then I think the final scene of the original series, the original ending, really spells out about how it's about subjectivity and dread. I kept saying anxiety before. What I meant was dread. That's the word that Kierkegaard uses. But anyway, so I mean, it's like the whole end scene. So I'm just gonna quote the lines that I highlighted before because I'm just gonna splice in the audio, I think. But anyway, so Shinji says the world of reality might not be so bad, but I hate myself. Hyuga says it's you that perceives reality as bad and unpleasant. It's you who's mistaken reality for the truth. Your perspective on reality and the importance you place on reality, the slightest difference in these things will greatly change the world inside your mind. There are as many truths as there are people, but there is only one truth for you, one made from your narrow perception of the world and from information that was altered to protect yourself, a warped truth. So they're basically saying that sorry.
They're saying a lot of shit, basically.
Yeah, they are saying a lot. You need to have a healthy relation to the world and other people and understand what it is you want for yourself in order to, claw your way out of your depression and live a fulfilled life. And if you're in the hole of depression and thinking that, you hate yourself or that other people hate you and so you hate yourself because of that, I mean, you're just probably... it might be true if you really suck, but most likely it's you're just you're fucking yourself up, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part too, because it's in a lot of ways Shinji does objectively just suck as a person, but kind of his realization at the end of those episodes is I might suck and everybody might hate me, but I'm able to choose the reality that I want to live in. And that includes being able to choose a self that I want to be as well, and I can change.
Yeah, his final line is actually, I was talking about this in therapy last week, and my therapist gave me like a mantra to make myself feel better if I'm
everybody
getting really depressed.
When you get a new therapist, everybody make sure that they're competent in the lore of Evangelion if you really want to have a good experience. Just you got to come out the gate with that, just so you know you're not wasting your time.
Yeah. But she gave me this mantra, and it was very similar to what Shinji's last line was. So I'm using, his last line, which is, I'm me. I want to be me. I want to be here, and it's okay for me to be here. Yeah.
That's a big important thing for people to do in all sorts of causes of depression, is sort of the idea of unconditional self-acceptance, which, and I think also is important to kind of like, to some degree, extend towards the rest of the world, because for the most part, people suck and are going to disappoint you at least some of the time. And so if you're not able to unconditionally accept the world as it is, you're going to be upset and angry and disappointed and scared all the time, because the people who you expected to never hurt you or disappoint you do that sometimes. And so it's like shattering your perfect expectations of the world, instead of being like, I mean, like, I was even thinking about that recently in terms of like the way some of the faults of like how the left operates. The left has, in a sense, a big like perfectionism problem, expecting everybody to never do wrong and never mess up. But it's also like, if we're really, about what we're about in terms of human liberation, that's all. We also have to accept that people, even if we succeed and all of our wildest dreams come true in terms of equality on Earth, people are still going to be disappointing and suck and have conflicts. And what we're fighting for is also the emancipation of people who will disappoint us and are imperfect and will fuck things up. But if they're not included, it's not really complete.
Basically, what we're saying is Shinji is Joe Rogan, and he may suck, but we need him. God. We need him to save humanity.
Fuck. Yeah, I mean, low-key, yeah. If Shinji just took some supplements and, like, drank the mushroom coffee, I wouldn't be having these problems. Nerve is actually, or Sayla is fighting for the Human Optimization Project, right?
Yeah.
That's his supplement company's tagline or whatever. Fuck. I did not want to go down this rabbit hole.
All right, so let's move on to the hedgehog's dilemma, which is another major concept. This is one they name explicitly like multiple times in the show. So it's a concept by Schopenhauer. I think it's Arthur Schopenhauer. I can't remember his first name, but anyway, they talk about it in episode 2, so it's like pretty important to the show. The idea is that hedgehogs, like people, can only get so close to one another without their defense mechanisms causing pain to one another. So in Evangelion, the Evas and the Angels have AT fields. AT stands for absolute terror, in case anyone was wondering.
Which is fucking sick, by the way.
Yeah. So the AT fields are clearly, in this metaphor, the spines of the hedgehog. Although I think a more subtle spines of the hedgehog is the synchronization with the Evas, because a high sync rate means the pilot is more effective at driving the Eva, but then damage to the Eva becomes much more dangerous to the pilot.
Yeah. Basically, the more traumatized you are as a child, the better Eva pilot you're going to be.
Yeah.
Sort of how it works. Like, the more you have trouble connecting with others, the more easily you'll be able to connect with this giant robot suit, which allows you to enact horrific violence on the world. Yeah.
Yeah, as Anno said himself, it's strange that Evangelion became such a hit. All the characters are so sick.
Yeah.
That is a real quote from him. So the series shows ways that the hedgehog's dilemma is true and not true in different ways. So, obviously, like, characters hurt each other through the show when they get close to one another, like Shinji and Misato, Shinji and Asuka, Rei and Asuka. But then, like, Rei develops past her submissive and distant character by becoming closer to the other Eva pilots and becoming more of a person. Shinji hurts Toji when Unit 1 nearly kills him. But then he also, like, becomes a better person because of Toji, I think. And I think Toji becomes less angry and reactive because of Shinji. They have like there's some explicit arguments against the Hedgehog's dilemma. So Kaworu, who's the final angel, says, you go to such extremes to avoid first contact. Are you afraid of connecting with other people? If you don't get close to others, you'll never be betrayed and you'll never hurt each other. But you'll also never be able to forget your loneliness. Humans can never banish their loneliness for good because being human means being alone. But humans are able to go on with their lives because they're able to forget it every so often. But then, of course, immediately after this, Shinji kills him.
He
owning him once and for all.
Shinji, he betrays Shinji and Shinji kills him, even though they're boyfriends.
Yeah. And we also find out in End of Evangelion that Gendo abandoned Shinji because he thinks that he would have hurt Shinji if he were close to him. But obviously, the message of the show and the movie is that that's absurd. Shinji was far more hurt. I mean, he was like, he could have been hurt by Gendo being close to him, but he was definitely hurt by Gendo abandoning him and sending him away and being distant and cold to him, because people aren't hedgehogs. So it just doesn't make sense.
But it's interesting because it is really like something when you're like really deep in depression and antisocial anxiety and dread is like, it feels very real to you. You know, the feeling like, oh, I can't leave my room and go see my friends because I'm just going to bring them down or say something thoughtless or cruel. So it's better to just stay here and avoid contact. You know, that's something that feels very real when you're, it feels very real when you're really in the grips of the shit. And it's hard to sort of see over that wall that your mind puts up. The only way I've ever figured out is just like experience, being able to recognize that pattern and provide myself with like counterexamples of like, oh no, actually I've lived a long enough time to know that it isn't always like that, and even if you're feeling that right now and that is your current reality, it won't be your reality forever. You just got to wait it out in some sense and try to like push on it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think most of the time when you're feeling like that, the best thing to do is to like force yourself to be around people, because I mean, like, you know, other people don't necessarily know what you're going through, and so like chances are you're gonna get cheered up a little bit by other people because they're doing okay that day, and you know they know you as, you know, how you normally are, not necessarily how you are in the moment, which is a, you know, depressed lump. And that it kind of goes back to the importance that the end of the show states about seeing yourself through others' eyes, you know, because if you're just going by your own internal monologue, it's incredibly inconsistent and very frequently false. And so to actually get the full picture of yourself as a person, you really need other people's perspectives and inputs on you. Like, you know, other people understand that you're not always a fuck up and all the other things that you tell yourself. Yeah, one of the big hallmarks of, you know, anxiety, depression spiral, I think, is just focusing in on like one thing you said or did and thinking that it's like the worst thing in the world, the worst thing you've ever done. And, you know, if you talk to someone else about it, they're like, oh, I didn't even notice that. Like, they're just not even, they're not even paying attention to that. All right. So there's also a lot of Freud in Evangelion, especially in End of Evangelion, I think. But definitely through the whole show. And the biggest Freud concept they have is the return to the womb. So it's the idea that all people fundamentally want to return to the womb where we are warm and safe and have everything provided for us, and there's no like danger really. And that, in a nutshell, is what the instrumentality thing is. We've mentioned it a couple times, but we didn't really explain it. Instrumentality is the goal of Sayla, and they basically are trying to break down the. I guess.
They're trying to
they said
dissolve the AT fields.
Like like all humans have AT fields. Is that right?
Yeah, basically they're saying like all conscious beings have an AT field, and that's what keeps us having a fixed and separate form from other people.
Right. So that's why we have individuality and dread. It's because we have these, these spines that keep us apart from other people.
Sort of the ego barrier or something like that.
Yeah. And then, so the process of instrumentality in End of Evangelion is very, very explicitly depicted as a return to the womb. Because, we have Rey turning into, a giant angel, and Unit 1 turns into like a phallus, basically, and goes into her forehead through a very vaginal opening. And that's what actually causes everyone to break down into just orange liquid. Which is
interestingly, the LCL is sort of like
thank you. I was trying to think of that, and
LCL. It's basically implied to. It's sort of like the blood of one of the original angels, Lilith.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like the fundamental primordial stew that all life is said to have originated from, and it's basically like I think also implied to be sort of a saline kind of like seawater / amniotic fluid kind of substance.
Yeah, it's also what lets them breathe.
Or it's Sunny D.
in the Avas.
Sunny D.
Yeah. And I think, like they say in the show that only motherless children are able to be pilots, but I think they made that up, and the reason that all of the pilots are motherless children is because Sayla was trying to achieve instrumentality, and the most likely type of person that would choose instrumentality, which is a return to the womb, is a child who lost their mother.
And typically, at least all the pilots that we've seen, the backstories of their mothers lost their lives due to being involved with Nerve and Sayla.
Yeah. Especially Gendo. Yeah. But like the return to the womb, which, as it's described on its own, sounds like pleasant. But when instrumentality is actually happening in the movie, like everyone is absolutely fucking terrified because they just see people being like popped and broken down into liquid. And, we hear like screams of agony as, everyone's souls are merged together by Rey. Yeah. And, pretty fucked up.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's an interpretation of Eva too, where it's like the ending of the original show is sort of like a timeline where Shinji, sort of is able to accept instrumentality as well, and it helps him accept himself. And it's sort of like the positive ending. Mm-hmm. It's like finding yourself by being able to break down the barriers between others. So all those characters who are talking to him are sort of like the people he knows and loves, but also he's finally actually able to hear what they think of him and, kind of like learn from them. Whereas in the movie, the whole thing takes a much more negative and pessimistic tone where Shinji rejects that connection ultimately after being confronted with it.
Yeah, because he also hears what everyone is thinking, but it's all the terrible things that people
yeah, exactly. It's sort of representing the like, oh, actually, if we had that, it would be awful because we'd never be able to get other people to fucking shut up about us
right.
ever.
Yeah.
And just generally the movie as a whole is sort of like Anno and Gainax saying like fuck you to all the people who hated the original TV ending.
Yeah. Which is like
oh,
honestly probably my
fuck
favorite
them.
ending of any show.
Yeah. It's just like explicitly like, fuck all of the just like nerds who want it. There's that meme that goes around where it's like somebody like looking at a a picture of like Evangelion.
Yeah.
And it's like really deep. The screen says like really deep psychological, important philosophical information, and it's like curving in an arc over their head, and the person just looking as like, oh, cool robot.
Cool robot. Yeah.
Cool robot. Yeah. So it's basically a fuck you to all the cool robot people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's like this like return to the womb stuff. It's already very explicit with the vaginal imagery, but I also think Shinji's final line before reversing the process of instrumentality makes it very explicitly about this too, because he says "Goodbye, mother," signifying his acceptance that we have to leave the womb forever at some point. Let's see. I think that's all I have on that. I have a small section on the domination of nature, which is kind of up our alley. So Gendo and Fuyutsuki have a conversation in one of the episodes where they are saying that cities are man's sanctuary from nature, which man was cast into as punishment. So they think being in nature is like punishment, and that cities are a fortress that keeps us from the evils of nature. And like the Evas are natural creatures that have been dominated by humans by being imprisoned in armor so that they can be controlled.
Yeah. Interestingly, the Evas are genetically human.
Right.
They have an identical genome. Yeah.
And I mean, there's not I don't think there's a whole lot on domination of nature stuff, but I thought it would be good to mention because that we're book-chin people, so that's a big book-chin thing. Yeah, that's all I have for that. All right, you wanna read some terrible reviews? This is a new segment that we have on the show.
Reviews of Eva?
Yes.
Here we go. All right.
Eva's a very polarizing anime. A lot of people correctly believe it's a 10 out of 10 anime, but some people think it's really bad. So let's see. The first one I have is a rating of 5 out of 10 by Archaon. 2,129 people found this review helpful. I think this is actually the top review of the anime.
Oh, no.
So Archaon says, this is like in the middle of it. So he said some other bullshit before this, but he says, that's not to say Shinji is a bad character. He's not. The problem is that one can only stomach so much unjustified self-pity, which unfortunately most of it was in his case, before wanting to slap some sense into the person in question. It's been pointed out to me that Shinji wanted to kill himself because he thought he was worthless, and that he should be pitied because of the bad hand he was dealt. I'm sorry, but that argument doesn't wash with me. If someone truly wants to kill themselves, then they will. So Shinji didn't really want to die. In addition to that, I know quite a few people who have been dealt the worst hands possible, yet they do not whine and complain about it. Parentheses, and many of these people did consider themselves to be useless/worthless at one time or another, yet they suffered in silence for the most part. What Shinji wanted was for people to pity him and tell him he wasn't worthless. And while this is not necessarily a bad thing, it was overused in NGE, to the point where I wanted to put him out of his misery, and not because I pitied him. The fact that Shinji's character has a tendency to ram his sense of worthlessness into the faces of the other characters is what put me off, as that type of behavior is usually for attention, rather than a cry for help. Well, what is the difference between those two? And because of the show's focus on Shinji, you can imagine how much I wanted to hit him afterwards. It wasn't that I didn't understand, it was just that they failed to depict him as an object of pity, and instead he came across as a whining, self-pitying, attention-seeking, and generally loathsome person.
Fucking neurotypicals, man.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that really encapsulates a probably seriously significant chunk of the people who hate this show.
Yeah, I would say it's approximately 100%.
I would say like 75. I would say 75.
Okay.
It's like just like neurotypicals who really don't get it because apparently they've never felt sad before, or if they felt sad, it was just because somebody knocked over their ice cream cone or whatever the fuck. I'd say that's
Can we really call them neurotypical though? I think they're the weirdos.
I mean, yeah, I've like probably met 5 of them in my life.
Yeah.
But they supposedly exist. There's like 2,000 of them on this comment thread or whatever. But I say the other critics are people who maybe come at it from another angle where they just like, they get the psychological stuff, but they focus on Shinji's character flaws because he is essentially in a lot of places like very misogynistic and just has a lot of like, obviously bad character traits,
right.
As a result of the trauma he's experienced, but, that really turns a lot of people off, understandably.
And the society he lives in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think hating a show because the character is a bad person is like kind of dumb guy stuff,
Yeah. People like fucking Breaking Bad or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, the show about a cool guy who,
Yeah, he's really cool.
Is really smart.
Cooking some cool drugs. Yeah.
Let's see. So he continues later. Unfortunately, the story breaks down in several places. Anno tried to make a show that merged all perspectives into one single view. And while he managed to achieve this in some measure, he failed because he focused too much on Shinji, to the extent that no other options were ever considered.
No other options, you say.
He's about to explain. Here's what I mean. NERV is a quasi-militaristic outfit, and as such, would generally have backup options available to them. The convenient Deus Ex Machina I mentioned earlier effectively removes all chance for anyone else to come to the fore, except for Shinji, that is. If the viewer is to believe that an organization such as NERV was supposed to protect the Earth, then they would at the very least look for other options, especially considering Shinji's character flaws. This would effectively mean that they would have at least some combat veterans or trained soldiers who could handle the Eva units. The use of teenagers as the leads in the show was simply so that it would appeal to the teenage audience.
Damn. This guy gets it. This guy fucking gets it.
Yeah.
They should hire him.
Yeah, I think he's a better writer than Anno, that's for sure.
Yeah. He's definitely well set up to write like the Marvel movie version of Evangelion, or like the J.J. Abrams adaptation or something.
I don't think I copied this part of it, but at some point he speculates that the reason they didn't do this is because they ran out of budget. So if they had more budget, then they would have had the character arc where they find someone to replace Shinji.
Yeah, they find the Marine copy paste guy. What did you say to me, you little, that guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, fuck.
All right, I have one more. This is from Name93, and they actually reviewed both Neon Genesis and End of Evangelion. So this is the intro to their review of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I do not consider myself fully qualified to review this series. I do not consider anyone to be fully qualified to objectively review this series.
Objectively, huh?
Objectively, yes.
Objectively.
Why? Why? Because even though Neon Genesis Evangelion may or may not be the most popular anime of all time, it may or may not be the most important anime of all time, and it most certainly isn't the best anime of all time. Very objective there. One thing's
a lot of
for
strange
sure.
claims here.
Yeah. One thing's for sure. It is the most controversial anime to have ever been created up to this day. No other anime has created as much controversy and sparked more debate than this one. No other anime has split the opinions of critics and fans alike like NGE has. Even at the time this reviews was written, 17 years since the original airing of the show, anime fans across the world argue, fight, throw shit at each other, figuratively speaking, of course. Thanks for that. Over whether Evangelion over whether Evangelion is a masterfully done work of art or a mediocre, pretentious piece of piss.
Huh. Is the piss frozen? How's it a piece?
Yeah, I don't know. That reminds me of that line from Silicon Valley where what's his face was like, "Kiss my piss." That's like the same, like kind of cringy thing to me.
Like sort of a platonic ideal piss that exists out somewhere. It's like some sort of concrete object or something.
Yeah,
it's the kilogram of piss. It exists in France in a vault.
Like I get the feeling that this guy calls people like a shit gibbon or
oh wow,
stuff like that. Yeah, that kind of insult. So he continues. There's also a small minority of people standing in the middle, not subscribing to either of the two extremes in opinion about the series, who mostly end up getting covered in shit that the others throw.
Who will think of the radical centrists?
Yeah.
I bet this guy voted for Hillary.
Probably. Either from the haters who complain that the moderates give the show too much credit, or from the rabid fans who explode on the mere mentioning of a possibility that Evangelion might not be, quote, the best anime ever!
Wow.
I happen to belong to this moderate minority, but I do confess to be leaning more towards the hating side than the other way.
Yeah.
By the way, he gave this a 7 out of 10.
Whoa.
So
getting some mixed messages here, bro.
Yeah. I don't. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 7 out of 10 for him or them from for the original series. He didn't like it because of the ending, which he's wrong about. Sorry, I keep saying he. So for End of Evangelion, they gave it a 3. They really did not like End of Evangelion. And so they preface it by saying that episodes 25 and 26 of this series were a huge middle finger to the audience.
Specifically him and people who think like him, I think.
Yeah.
He understood that at least.
And the not unexpected outrage by fans caused Anno to create End of Evangelion, which is actually just a rumor. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but some people think that he created End of Evangelion as a big fuck you, but it was actually close to the intended original ending that they would have done, except they just ran out of budget.
Yeah, but he did decide to maybe because people thought that include some extra fuck you content. Like there's like a clip in the in the end of Ava movie where it's showing photographs of death threats and letters telling him to kill himself that he received after the end of the TV show. Yeah.
Name 93 will get into that part actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a long, really, really long intro. 3 or 4 paragraphs before he even starts the review. They start the review. And they do one of my favorite dumb person things. Smug dumb person things, which is so they say this review is already different from my usual ones, and that's due to 2 reasons. 1, End of Evangelion is in a special league of its own regarding the films in general, let alone the anime I usually watch. Not a very good sentence there.
But this person thinks a good cartoon is just watching some
Fate
really
Zero
overdrawn some overdrawn characters standing around flapping their mouths, occasionally a good action cut, and then the episode's over or something.
Yeah. I looked through their other reviews. They rated Fate Zero 10 out of 10.
Ooh, buddy.
So number 2 is I just don't give 2 fucks. Fuck with star. Yeah. They censored fuck. This is a rant, and I intend to enjoy it. And here's my favorite thing. So buckle up and prepare to go.
Okay, boomer.
I love when someone tells me to buckle up for their bad article or essay or tweet storm.
Yeah, it's probably good advice. It's kind of dangerous to read them. You're just gonna you better buckle up, otherwise you're gonna fall out of your chair because you're so infuriated by how stupid this person is. Yeah,
so I'm buckled up and I'm ready to start reading this.
Right. Me too.
So, as the opening scene plainly shows, what do you think they're gonna say?
What is the opening scene show? It's like Shinji, just like
It's Shinji jacking off to Asuka.
Oh, the movie. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a way to start a movie, by the way.
Yes. I think that was also a jab at the fans in some regards.
Yeah, sexualizing the fucking child protagonist.
Yeah. Like on a side note related to that, for Evangelion, the most popular toy that they made, you would think it would be the cool giant robots, but no, it's actually the figurine of Asuka in bandages, and the skin suit, which is really gross to me.
Yeah, there's a whole like other rant you could go on about like the weirdness of the Evangelion sort of merchandise boom. Like that's far by just like orders of magnitude the most successful part about the show is they've just made bank off of merchandising. And especially like merchandise
millions of dollars on
the
guys that do come on figurine pictures.
Yep.
If you don't know what that is, you probably shouldn't look it up. I would recommend against it.
Do not.
Or you could listen to the most recent Blocked Party episode where they talk about it for quite a bit. Anyway.
Or not.
So, as the opening scene plainly shows, Anno's single most important objective in this film is pissing the fan base off as much as possible. And he accomplishes this superbly and in numerous ways. First of them, making the already unlikable and despised Shinji as appalling and disgusting as possible. There isn't a single person with a sane mind that doesn't loathe and hate Shinji and and doesn't want to torture him in the most gruesome, painful ways possible.
Yeah, again, the neurotypicals are at it again, it seems.
Yeah.
People with sane minds,
that sane thing that people want to do, torture people in the most gruesome, painful ways possible for being depressed.
Extremely
and
sane.
Kind of a
sane
shitty person.
society we've got here, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool story, bro.
If you thought he was spineless and whiny in the series, just wait to see how he acts during the film, and in particular during the first half of the series, when instead of fighting off the enemy in his Eva, he sits under the staircase, weeps and cries for the unconscious Asuka to come and help him, after he gave himself a wank over her just 2 minutes earlier. Our protagonist, ladies and gentlemen!
This explains it. This person's a Brit.
Yes. Yeah,
Fucking
I keep
wankers,
forgetting about that when I'm reading it. Let's see. So he
Gotta read it in a
says...
British accent now.
Oh, God. I don't want to do that. So he says the other characters are ruined, too. So he says, remember Misato Katsuragi? Do you remember, like, one of the three main characters? And how she was turning into Anno towards the series finale, parentheses, along with the rest of the cast. By the way, all of their parentheticals, they put a space between the parentheses and the letter next to it. Very annoying to me. So yeah, Misato, becoming depressed and upset and stuff. Do you remember that? Well, Mr. Anno clearly doesn't, for she's all tough and fiery at the beginning of the movie. That is not true. I read this review and then I was like, I wonder if they're right about that. So I went back and watched episode 24 again, and she is not depressed in that episode at all. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So she basically bitch slaps Shinji for being such a whiny, spineless bitch, and practically embodies the feelings of the audience in doing so. Shame she doesn't put a bullet in his head. Not only would she make the viewers happy, she'd save the whole of mankind from turning into a stale orange juice. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Very
he's
cool.
getting ahead of himself, huh? All right.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, this is... God, it's just so many gems in here. Asuka starts off as being unconscious, then wakes up to be catatonic and scared and depressed, just like she was at the end of episode 24. Then, in literally 20 seconds, during which she has a vision of her mother, she makes a 180 degrees turn and proceeds to kick some evil Eva arse. Great writing there, Anno.
Yeah, actually, unironically, great writing.
Yeah.
Like that was probably like that's definitely the best part of the movie in terms of
That is like my favorite
feel
scene
good.
in this series.
Yeah, she's having a fucking breakthrough, dude. Come on. That's like her congratulations moment. In a sense.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Same with Rey, who is barely present for the first half of the movie, albeit it is understandable why that is so, only to saturate the screen for most of the second half. She's also ripped of her previous personality.
Because she's a clone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how Rey works, but okay.
She's ripped of her previous personality, uncompromisingly sticking it to Gendo and accepting her destiny as Anno's final plot device in the quest to piss the fans off so much you can cover the entire Earth in piss.
Oh.
Speaking of good writing.
Yeah.
Very good in
good writing.
review writing.
Yeah,
good.
That was definitely like a metaphorical allusion to covering the Earth in LCL, I'm sure. Very clever on their part.
Yeah. Even though there was hardly anyone really likable in NGE's cast of characters, and even though they were all deeply flawed as people, they were believable and good characters. Until the last third of the series, at least. So, like, the best part of the series. And End of Evangelion stripped them of everything, disregarding continuity, and only making Shinji the most hated fictional character of all time after Jar Jar Binks.
Jar Jar did nothing wrong.
I do hate Jar Jar Binks, but yeah, saying that he's more hated or less hated than Shinji, I think is quite a stretch.
Yeah. Who's worse, anime fans or Star Wars fans? I don't want to judge that contest.
That is a very serious debate to have. Yeah.
Yeah. Another podcast episode for that one, I think. Star Wars versus anime fandom. Who is the most depraved trash of humanity?
So they move on to the plot, and they say it starts off decently enough, not counting the opening wank scene, only to collapse spectacularly in the second half, falling so hard it destroyed the world and liquefied all living things in the process. But while decent, the first part was still not very good, and in retrospect, it falls apart together with the rest of the movie. Falls apart together, I think, is a brilliant turn of phrase there.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of like a pop emo band or something.
Yeah. That would be a good emo band name, I think.
Midwest emo from the early 2000s.
Yes, yes. AKA my favorite genre of music.
It's good. It's basically like the classical music in Ava is good, but American football might have been better.
Yeah. It's riddled with the aforementioned character inconsistency. So, like, not riddled with that because it wasn't character inconsistency. It's character development. Plot holes, which they don't actually describe any of. Contrivances, which again they don't describe any of. Repetition of ad hoc resolutions from the original series, namely when Ritsuko stops a massive hack of the Magi supercomputers again, and in the exact same way, only much, much faster and much more.
Maybe she got better at it.
Yeah.
She had some practice.
Also, they're repeating things from the end of the original series because this is a remake of the end of the original series.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
You started your review by saying
that. Yeah.
There's also some ridiculous no-brainers like this one. The Japanese military are assaulting the Nerv HQ. While their forces are still inside the facility, trying to retrieve the Avas, their own forces detonate an N2 mine over their heads, blasting the geofront into pieces.
That's totally something a military would never do in a desperate situation. Sacrifice their own soldiers? Unthinkable.
Yeah, yeah. Just like, just like they should have gotten a replacement pilot for Shinji, but they couldn't because of budget,
Yeah.
All very down-to-earth people making these reviews.
They just needed to send in SEAL Team 6 or whatever the fuck. It would have worked out.
Yeah, yeah. They would have done something cool, like killing Bin Laden, you know?
Yeah. They would have assassinated Osama Ikari or whatever. Gendo. They would have got him.
All right. So let's see. I'm skipping a little bit. Let's see. Okay. Here's another example of this reviewer's great writing. To put it simply, if the infamous live pudding scene from Akira, I don't know what that's referring to, and the eclipse.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's where basically, you know, it's
where Tetsuo is like blowing up or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just like turning into like weird, you know, he's mutating and becoming a disgusting meat baby.
Okay. So just a scene from Akira. Okay. And the Eclipse episodes from Berserk had an S&M orgy during a Black Mass and conceived a baby, which in turn were to be raised by David Cronenberg. Then the second half of the movie would be that baby.
What the fuck?
Cool, man.
Yeah,
so
especially like the Eclipse thing with Berserk was definitely not an S&M orgy. It was like
no, it's if those two scenes had
scene.
an S&M orgy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Still.
And that famous thing that happens during S&M orgies, if they had a baby, you know.
Yeah.
While they were doing bondage sex, if they had a baby somehow, which I think is very possible, then
really going off the rails here.
Yeah, then the second half would be that baby. There's just no point in explaining it. You have to see it to believe it. If the episodes 25 and 26 were mindfuck, period, then this is an all-out gangbang orgy of Anno randomly throwing around epically grotesque and random scenes filled with pointless and shameless religious symbolism that very unsubtly screams, "Ask me what it means! Ask me what it means!"
God damn it. I love when people too like look at it's sort of like the psychological version of Cool Robot, where they look at like, you know, pretty intensely meaningful dialogue and they're like, whoa, trippy, what a mindfuck. Instead of being like, oh wow, this actually relates to me, you know, and it's like, oh, this character is having an emotional breakthrough right now, or you know.
Yeah, just wait, it's gonna get so much worse. It's gonna get so much worse.
There's more.
Yes, there's. Yeah, I think I'm gonna skip part of it, but still, this is just too good. Okay, so what does all that symbolism mean? Fuck all, that's what. And it's so painfully obvious that the endless and futile attempts by the rabid fans to read some deeper meaning into it causes me and the creator, that big troll, to laugh my arse off because they've taken the bait and allowed Anno to win. That's another one of my favorite dumb guy things is like, yeah, if you think something, then you're letting someone else win. What are you fucking talking about?
It's definitely kind of a very like debate me kind of nerd ass stupid thing to do.
Yes.
You've conceded my point by responding, or yeah, fuck.
And we get some insight into why they think this way. So they say, also, if I may quote from Roger Ebert's movie glossary, quote,
"Oh boy,
if you have to ask what it symbolizes, it didn't."
That definitely sounds like how metaphor and symbolism works.
Yeah, I think that really applies.
Totally
here.
explicit and easy to get, very transparent. That's good symbolism.
Albeit the quote goes a bit too far, the point still stands. We also get some of the trademark navel gazing too. That's something that I do like for comedy. I say also and too and as well in the same sentence, and this guy just did.
Nice.
We also get some of the trademark navel gazing too, because episode 25 and 26 just weren't enough. What a joy! Anyways, all of the spectacular mindfuckery and endless nudity of the second half aside, there's one remaining and pretty major flaw of the story. Guess what it is? What do you think it is, Reed?
What is it? Does he hate the ending? Like the scene on the beach?
Yes, but why does he hate the ending?
Because with this guy it would be like because it's just another. It would probably seem to them like another fuck you to the audience, where Asuka is calling Shinji disgusting.
If your answer was it's not conclusive, then congratulations!
Oh my god!
Yes, despite being promoted as a proper and cohesive conclusion of the series that's supposed to tie up all the loose ends and provide answers to countless questions that were raised over the course of the series, it fails to achieve that. Was it actually promoted that way? I don't think it was. If it was, that was the troll. That was Anno trolling you and saying "fuck you," not the actual work.
He's also said before that like Eva is a story that repeats. So there's also sort of the notion that the conclusions of the end of Evangelion with the third impact is sort of setting off like a repetition of the timeline, which is where they get the like rebuild movies they've made. So it's kind of not supposed to be conclusive. It's sort of like setting off the new loop of suffering that everybody's going to go through.
Yeah. So they ramble on about how they didn't tie every detail up into a nice little bow and beat you over the head with what everything means because, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just fake symbolism to troll you. So now they move on to the good things about the movie. I gave it 3 out of 10 and not 1 out of 10 after all. And the funny thing is that they immediately say more negative things here. So the visuals are very good throughout the movie, with the exception of a short period of live-action stock footage near the end of the film. Doesn't know what stock footage means. In that one scene, a person with a low-budget camcorder randomly wanders around town, filming things like empty movie theaters or city streets. This comes as
stock
quite
footage, you can see the watermark on it. Stock footage.
Yeah, they just happen to find stock footage of the Seiyu of Rei and Asuka and Mitsu. Yeah. So let's see. This comes as quite a shock midway through and manages to come across as exceedingly ugly. The point? A pretentious and futile attempt to make the movie relevant to the real world and probably connect further with the audience. Well, it failed.
Oh no, how dare they try to connect with the audience.
This is my favorite part of the review because they're talking about a scene where they literally show a fucking filmed clip of the audience of Evangelion watching Evangelion as a commentary on the audience of the fucking show.
It's just meaningless symbolism, it's just a cop.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
Those are just people. They could be in any movie theater holding Ava merchandise,
Why is this guy trolling me by telling me that I need to get back into the real world and stop watching anime all the time? All I want to do is just watch anime. I just want some giant robot fights. And again, this is the part of the review that's supposed to be what they liked about the movie. I don't know if I want to read the next part. They say the music is pretty good, which it's just classical music, so who cares?
But I mean, for real though, probably one of the most banging opening themes of all time.
Yeah.
Iconic pop song there.
Yeah, and the music they used for the scene where they killed Kaworu was extremely good too. And so just I'm not going to read their whole conclusion, but it has some of that trademark bad nerd writing, so I want to read part of it. They say, well, that's it. The end of Evangelion. And what a steaming pile of dick and cock it was. Yet I absolutely loved it. Can't decide whether they loved it or not. The main reason why I loved is because, unlike NGE, which was an extremely mixed bag with some very good stuff and lots of very bad stuff, End of Evangelion was just plainly horrible, and I could just indulge in pure, justified hatred that my rational and objective mind didn't allow me with the original series. Love being rational and objective.
Personally, I think you can have a lot of fun with this steaming pile of dick and cock. I don't know what the big deal is. It's pretty good.
As long as it's not too hot.
Objectively speaking. Yeah, steaming, but not, scalding.
Also, I didn't notice that, for some reason in my mind, it was pussy and cock, but it's dick and cock.
Nice.
Yeah. Two different things.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to read from that.
You see, there's two kinds of penises in the world. There's dicks and there's cocks. But you can pile them all together, and then they start steaming like a compost pile, generating their own heat. We can power the world with this energy source. We just got to get all the dicks and cocks together on the same page and in a pile. And then they'll rewrite Evangelion.
So there you have it. A work of art better than any anime ever produced. Name 93's review of End of Evangelion. Wow. I thought it was pretty good.
Truly epic. Definitely a mindfuck of a review.
Yeah. Amazing. So to conclude our episode on Evangelion, don't watch it because it's a steaming pile of dick and cock. And
yeah, or if
the
you
characters
like that,
are bad
watch it.
people. No, for real though, it's one of my favorite anime ever now. I was very, very skeptical of it, and now I would put it in my top 3 easily. How would you rate it among your favorites?
I would say like it's got to be pretty close to the top of the list. Especially just because of the like the influential factor it had. It was like one of the first like really adult series that I watched through and was like actually like emotionally impacted by in a significant manner, and it's like it's got serious rewatch value. You can just pretty much dig through it endlessly, like teasing out new interpretations or themes that may or may not be there, but it doesn't matter because if you think they are for you.
Yes, it is truly a show that you can watch 6 times in a row and write 11 pages of notes on.
Yep. Probably more if you do all the freeze frame, go frame by frame, and pick out weird, especially because there's all those parts where it's doing like the big Ano text where it's like just flashing a bunch of words at you really fast and you have to stop and think about them for a second. Yeah,
that scene with the live action stock footage, according to Name 93, there's a lot of stuff that you could unpack in there. Yeah.
And I'd also rate it highly because of its just like massive cultural impact on the animation industry in general. Like its impact
and the podcast industry.
And the podcast industry, for real. Yeah. And now with Netflix, it's the normies know about it too. So there's that.
So you have no excuse.
It's gone on to influence like obviously loads of Japanese animation since, and it's led to the creation of like Gainax really getting big as a studio, which ended up, launching other people's careers. Like Studio Trigger is kind of taking up that, like the Gainax mantle these days, and it's gone on to like influence.
Are they the ones that did Kill La Kill and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a good
it's
studio.
gone on to influence like American animators to the extent where like there's an episode of Steven Universe that has a like explicit visual reference to the beach scene in End of Evangelion.
Nice.
So it's just like it's got worldwide appeal, and is like did so much for like people really beginning to take animation seriously again as like a really legit form of art and media.
Yeah. All right, and let's end on a question that I had here, which is like a comment that I saw an awful lot from people who liked the show. Which is anime worse now than it was in the 90s? Because this is what everyone was saying was Evangelion is the best show ever. Anime peaked in the 90s. Everything since then has been absolute shit.
No. I don't agree.
Me neither.
I think basically there's just been there's probably like a higher volume of shit that gets pumped out these days as like the industry has gotten bigger and more corporatized,
Mm-hmm.
So you just got like your endless parade of terrible like isekai light novel ripoff shows, and it sucks. Obviously, there's just fewer anime being produced in the 80s and 90s overall.
Yeah. One YouTuber was complaining that. Oh, sorry.
Like
go ahead.
1 to 1. It's just like there's probably a 1 to 50 ratio of like actually gems, good shows versus just kind of like commercial trash to fill airtime on TV.
Yeah. One YouTuber was complaining that moe culture ruined aughts and tens anime But I think he's ignoring
Didn't
that
help.
giant robots ruined 80s and 90s anime, and that's part of the reason that
Yeah.
Evangelion exists in the first place. Because there
Yeah,
was
I
a
mean, like, if
million
you think
giant
of-
robot clone shows
Yeah.
that were just shit.
Yeah, if you think of 80s and 90s anime, it's like ultra violence, hyper macho masculinity, like violence stuff. You know, like Fist of the North Star and all that.
Yeah.
All the endless ripoffs of that.
Which is actually really bad. I don't know.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's like very nostalgic, and the one line is really cool. The you're already dead thing. That's great. But like
Yeah.
the show is
That's all you
so
need
bad.
to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like all the things that Eva was deconstructing, like, you know, kind of like stoic masculinity, hyper-violence, giant robots, really ridiculous and obscure sci-fi concepts, is like, yeah, those were really common and they sucked. We have new things that suck, you know,
Yeah.
but the old things still suck too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like for some reason I don't know, like people seem to think that like 90s anime were like maybe more high concept or something like that, or like that 90s anime were all like Evangelion, but like the only one that I can think of that's even comparable from the 90s is Serial Experiments Lain. And that was just an OVA, I think. Or it was only 13 episodes. But like in the 2000s you have deep shows like Eureka 7, Mob Psycho 100, FLCL, Kill La Kill, Noeen, Paranoia Agent, Steins Gate, Madoka Magica, Mushishi. Like there's just so many now.
When did Cowboy Bebop come out? Was that like late 90s or something?
It was
Early
99 to
2000s?
2000.
Okay, yes. That's when it started, quote unquote, getting good.
Yeah.
You know?
But even Bebop, like as much as I love it, it's not like I don't think it has like much deeper meaning like
Yeah. That's interesting
Evangelion
too,
or
'cause,
Lane
like,
does.
that transition between like the 90s and the 2000s was also sort of the period where like basically like Western and especially English speaking fans started to actually see this stuff come on TV in like
Yes.
a more like uncut and unedited way, whereas like previously there was just a much lower volume of content that was like making it over, and often it was like really poorly translated or really chopped up and cut to like quote unquote appeal to a Western audience or whatever. So, you know, there's just like, so I think a lot of the like higher quality stuff was just like being filtered through a finer mesh to get over here in that time.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah, that's
in
true.
the 2000s, stuff started coming on Toonami and like Cartoon Network stuff, and Funimation was actually putting out stuff, and you know, Shonen Jump was getting published, so there's just more stuff people were exposed to,
Yeah.
and a lot of it was trash.
Yeah, I think another big thing that people think about 90s anime is that like the animation was better back then because it wasn't CGI.
Yeah.
But I don't think I agree with that either because
Nope.
like just out of the examples that I already named, Mob Psycho 100, Mushishi, like those have outstanding animation, just incomparable to anything
yeah,
that
and
came
it's not
before it,
like
I think.
it's not even like Gainax got bad at animating after Evangelion. They got even better. They went on and produced like Gurren Lagann and stuff. So
Yeah. I think people are thinking of like the Berserk show, like the new Berserk show where it's like, oh, it doesn't capture
yeah.
the feeling of the manga. It's, well, okay. Sure.
yeah,
But there's like
You're
a
gonna have
million
some
examples where you're
misses with the
fucking
hits.
wrong.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think we both fully agree on this stuff, and yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. So
wrap it
Reed,
up, wrap
thank
it
you
up.
for joining me. It's always great to have you
Yeah.
on.
If we want to have like an ambiguous Evangelion ending, should you like choke me out and then I call you disgusting to make it?
Yes.
Or do we want to like have it be conclusive?
I like going
All
with the inconclusive stuff.
All right,
Actually, you know what? No, let's do a happy ending. Let's do a happy ending.
Okay.
I want to be myself. I want to be here. It's okay for me to be here in this world. Congratulations.
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 Congrats, bro.
Congratulations.
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 Congratulations. Thanks, everyone.